Hello, my name is Scott Owens, and I'm the team lead and project manager for the Business Systems Software Development Team at the U.S. Geological Survey National Geospatial Technical Operations Center. Welcome, and thank you for tuning into my presentation today, where I'd like to share with you some of my experiences and observations on our organization's Agile transformation and adoption of more open source resources. Here's what I'll be covering in our talk. We'll have about 3 minutes at the end of the session for me to answer questions, so please be sure to submit any that you might have, and I'll cover as many as I can. So how does a small team within a large hierarchical government organization reconcile practicing the Agile methodology against the business practices inherent in a government department? Truth be told, it can be a difficult endeavor. However, it's not impossible. So today, I'm going to describe how the USGS NGTOC adopted and adapted the Agile methodology for its development teams, with a focus on how my team navigated through the challenges of operating within the framework of the federal government while undergoing our own Agile transformation. The mission of the USGS NGTOC is to collect, process, disseminate map products and data to the public via the national map, as well as other platforms. This includes three-dimensional elevation and hydrography data, map products and services for desktop, web, and mobile applications, as well as a US topo map. Obviously, systems and software play a critical role in every aspect of this value stream. The NGTOC works from two locations, one in Denver, Colorado, and another in Raleigh, Missouri. And I'm actually located in Raleigh, Missouri. And we have about 55 developmental staff supporting NGTOC spread between these two sites, as well as a few scattered around different remote locations of the United States. So this is how my Agile team fits within the whole organization. After all, this is a briefing about government organizations, so you got to have an organizational chart. So the National Geospatial Technical Operations Center falls underneath the National Geospatial Program, underneath the core science systems of the U.S. Geological Survey, and of course, we're all underneath the U.S. Department of the Interior. And my team fits down there on the bottom, direct support to NGTOC and the NGP. So my team, Business Systems, is responsible for developing and maintaining the systems and applications that track and report on the status of all aspects related to data acquisition, agreements, task orders, data collection, processing, and publication. Ultimately, we are responsible for providing the business intelligence to our higher headquarters for their use in reporting to U.S. Congress on what the American public is getting for their money. So our journey towards adopting the Agile methodology started several years ago when our leadership recognized that we could no longer keep doing business as usual. So they started looking at the latest trends in software development within the commercial sector. Even though we had a terrific staff at NGTOC that were highly skilled and passionate about the organizational mission, we were being hampered by stovepipe practices, friction between groups, and having to react to ever-changing requirements. Leadership recognized the state we were in, so they looked at these challenges as opportunity to transform and improve not only our operations, but our work environment as well. So after researching and considering alternatives, leadership saw the potential benefits in transitioning to Agile, and they green-lighted the initiative and proceeded on an incremental move towards Agile. Okay, it all sounds good in principle, but how are we going to accomplish this heavy lift? Now that leadership was on board, we needed to figure out how to bring the whole organization along. So this definitely was going to take a team effort, all the way from developers to mid to level to high level management. And luckily for us, we had support along the entire spectrum of that. Everybody was excited about this opportunity. It was a really refreshing change. So we all were on board and trying to say, okay, how are we going to do this? So we decided we ought to start an incremental approach, starting with mass training, get everybody on a baseline so they can at least get understanding and familiar with the concepts and the principles of the Agile methodology and get that basic foundation. We did have some people come in from the commercial sector into the USGS NGTalk that brought some of these fresh ideas, which also helped us in selling this initiative. So after we got the mass training accomplished, then we started having discussions on what we should do, how we should do it, and then some decisions came out of that. And the decisions were that one of the things we needed more information. So we wanted to do some operational experiments and some testing to figure out how this would fit within our organization and if it is a viable option for us. So after we did some testing with a few teams and product owners and started doing sprints and retrospective and sprint planning and some integrated working groups, we discovered some things that we needed to adopt and adapt a little bit from the Agile methodology to fit our organization. And so we came up with our best practices and we started spreading those ideas around to the rest of the team. The last thing we did was we hired the project managers. What we found is development teams, we are still stovepipe by nature just because of what the pieces that we had to support. So like business systems, we support the intelligence side of things, business intelligence. Then we have people that support specific programs like the national map, production on demand and some other things. And so what we had to have is a project manager who's a government person who basically would function as a scrum master, but also as a liaison to the product owners and to supervise the effective work of the team. So we had everything in place. Everybody's on board. The last thing we had to figure out is, okay, let's make sure that we got all the pieces in place that we can enable the project managers and the teams to effectively fit in with the organization and function and deliver what was required. So we had what I call a gaggle, an adapter kit, a government agile adapter kit. And basically it shows that at the lowest levels, at the team level, that is where the most agile it lives. Teams are doing sprints, they're doing retrospectives, they're doing sprint planning. So they're doing the iterative development, continuous delivery. They're working in the agile environment, in the agile methodology. But of course, the higher you go, particularly the higher headquarters things, you have to start fitting into the government side of things. So we have some mechanisms to help transition information up and down along the way. So of course, we got the Jira board, which is transparent, people can go in, but a lot of managers won't go into that, but the developers and project managers do. We also have a series of monthly developer syncs. We wanted to spread some best practices amongst the developers. So we have monthly meetings, get together, and then we basically show off our work to the other teams and how we did things and share some ideas and best practices that way. We also have monthly project manager syncs where the project managers get together with our leadership. And we talk about the work that we've been doing and some of the challenges that we have, and also spread some of our best practices. And then of course, we have some higher specific meetings with leadership. So we have monthly integrated working groups, and that bring together product owners, sometimes business owners, users, stakeholders, development team, as well as a project manager, basically just to do as-and checks along the way, make sure we're progressing as we should, and to keep transparency so everybody knows what we're doing. And then we have project pages and updates. And of course, we got the quarterly, monthly, and annual planning reviews that we have to do as part of the government processes. Okay, well, that was how our organization got started on the Agile road. Now I'd like to take you through some of my team's transformation experiences. My team was the last to transition, and this was a deliberate decision by leadership because they wanted to wait for the project manager to be hired and allow that person to lead the team in their own way through the transition process. So when I was hired and came aboard, I wasn't exactly sure what I was getting into, but I did sense that there were some specific issues that leadership was looking for the project manager to tackle. So I knew I was in for a challenge. My first priority was to get to know the team, both as individuals and how they operated as a team. In my past experiences, the main thing I've learned about managing teams was that leadership is key. A good leader knows how to encourage, enable, and effectively task his or her personnel, and most importantly, ensure that team members are recognized for the work that they do. Another very important trait of a leader is the ability to filter and prioritize work for the team. This is one of the main problems the NGTalk was trying to address by adopting the Agile methodology. Development teams didn't have someone to manage the workload. So requests are coming in directly to developers from many directions, causing them to jump from system to system and problem to problem. One of the first things the developer said to me when I came on was that she was working on too many projects, and if I could just relieve her of one of them, she'd be happy. She's a Java developer and worked on a couple of proprietary base applications and databases, as well as a few open source applications and databases. She was jumping back and forth between these at a cost of time, having to reset her mental framework, switching between languages and systems. I told her that I couldn't relieve her from her working on any of those systems. However, I would shield her from outside distractions and provide her with the predictable work schedules that will allow her to focus instead of having to jump around and reacting to outside requests. So while I was getting to know the team and the team dynamics, I was also taking inventory of the systems that were responsible for development and maintenance. We had about 16 separate applications, systems, databases, almost all of them based on proprietary solutions, except for two were open source. And out of those 16, there's probably about 6 of them that were really, really critical ones. The 2 of the open source ones we had built up a lot of technical debt. Those were deprecated systems, and they're way past the end of the life cycle. We had to do something about that. And actually, that's one of the ones I'm going to be talking about in a minute as my example. So the other thing I had to figure out was, okay, who are the people? What are the roles? Who's the product owner? Who's the business owners? Where are the stakeholders? Where are the users? All that. And so on this slide, I'm really focusing on the one system I was alluding to earlier, which was one of the ones I had a sense that there was something that they wanted to solve. And so my main issue with this one, this is an enterprise type system that has people from different departments who have requirements. And although the system manages all of those things, there are unique pieces within them. So there are some people that are pseudo product owners. There really wasn't a one product owner. So that was my big challenge and I got leadership's help on this one. They actually were able to pin the rows on somebody, said, okay, you are the product owner, so you can adjudicate the requirements for all these other theme areas, make sure that I can stay on the business system team can stay on focus. So once we got that pretty much sorted out, we started working. But as I was looking around, I started realizing I was operating based on some assumptions that turned out to be incongruent with reality. I had assumed that the team understood the Agile methodology because I was coming in an organization, they were talking about the whole transformation, but I failed to grasp that the team was the last one to go. So they had training, but the training was like 2 years before. So they needed a little refresher. So they weren't really up to snuff yet on that part of it. However, they were extremely technically skilled. They were a great group of people and open-minded to change for the most part. Yeah, there's some resistance and some team dynamics we had to work through, but we eventually got there. Also assume the product owners understood the Agile methodology. That was true to a degree. Some of them did, and some of them participated. Some of them did not. Yeah, so that was a little issue as well. And old habits die hard. So you're in a government organization, people have grown up doing that. So new ideas sometimes can be a little bit challenging. But one of the other real problems I had was not always the product owner was clearly identified. So that was always a bit of a challenge as well. And it's really hard for business systems because we support across all of the theme areas. So there's a lot of blurred lines in there. And sometimes, finding somebody who wants to take responsibility for all of it could be a challenge. So my next steps were, okay, let's get the team going, get them iteratively up to speed and catch up with the other development teams. So I started, of course, getting the Jira board configured, starting building backlogs, getting the schedules set up, and then started doing practice sprints and slowly sped things up and started increasing. And got the team used to working off the Jira board, used to that iterative environment. And so things were going pretty well. We went pretty quick. And within 3 months, they were learning at the same time I was learning. And so we all jumped on the Agile bus and we were happily started, okay, we're Agile now. Okay, so we had, like I alluded to earlier about this project, there's one project that was going through transition. It was a deprecated open source solution, so we had to get some new, a new stack and all that for it, but also there was some new requirements. So as we're adjusting transition, we had to work on this thing. So it became our first major project in our Agile transformation. In the next few slides, I'll use an example to illustrate my team's experience. So at first we were off to a good start, or so I thought. We had, for this particular project, we held in-person meeting, a kickoff meeting. People came from DC, Denver, and then to Raleigh. And then we also had another meeting in Denver that we all came there for. And got together basically just to start initially, okay, what are the requirements? Let's start developing some of the user stories, let's taking some notes, let's assign some further work. So we all agreed, okay, we have a short timeline just to get some initial information together so we can start iteratively building this thing. And so everybody's agreed, yes, great. They all took off, went home. And so I'm expecting a lot of flurry of activity in my email box when I get back, and nothing. I was like, okay, what's going on here? Nobody's responding. Nobody's following up on all the assignments that we gave them. What's up? So I figured, okay, this isn't working. So I've got to reassess the situation. Despite everybody's best intentions, people were consumed with their primary jobs. And that's really the main problem. This is, after all, a government organization. Everybody had bosses to answer to and requirements to meet. Being product owners, stakeholders, and users were oftentimes additional duties on top of everything else, just yet another distractor that they had to do in their day-to-day business jobs. So I came to realize that I had to adapt and find methods that would provide me with the information I needed to deliver the product, while at the same time reducing the burden on them. So even though we had established a framework intended to enable collaboration, I quickly realized that project pages, Jira boards, and regular meetings isn't working for this project. Product owners just don't engage this way, at least not governmental product owners. This is the situation here. They default to email questions and discussions, which often leave key individuals out, either on purpose or by accident. Plus, their schedules don't allow them to effectively engage anyway. So I decided to use the tools that they use and elicit their participation. So yeah, it's old-fashioned, but it works. But I had a method to my madness. So what I did was, okay, they're used to working in PowerPoints. They're used to having, when somebody puts a comment in it, they would get a notification, and so that would prompt them to look at the thing. And so what I wound up doing was, okay, people are visual creatures, and that was one of our problems. We have to build something that no one's really seen before. They've seen the initial part of it, but what we had to do now is significantly different than what existed at the time. So I started, okay, let's go into, I used Google presentation at the time because we were on Google. I made some mock-ups. And basically, this is a data entry example for one of the data entry pages. And okay, here are the fields, and here's what data will go in that. And I would assign comments. Okay, what do you want to happen when this button gets clicked? What information do you want to get in there? And so they would give me that information. We had that conversation captured in the comments. So now I have a history of this discussion. And I can go back and say, well, remember 6 months ago, you said for me to do this. Okay, so did it change, or did we just forget? And then the other piece of it is I linked that to a spreadsheet of the tables and attributes that would populate those fields. So now the developer had basically a box top, like on the puzzle box top. They knew what they were going to build. They knew what the picture was supposed to look like, and they knew what pieces would go into that picture. And once we started doing that, it really paid off. But that wasn't the end of my evil plan, because I wanted to get them to get more engaged in the Jira, because really that is where I wanted to capture the history of things, because you have those comments, you have the work logs, all those things you capture within one place in Jira. And so it's not an email, people aren't going to get left off, they can see it. But product owners weren't really engaging within Jira. So I started just adding them as watchers, and now specifically point comments to them. And so this is an example of a discussion where it was between myself and a product owner on a specific feature they wanted. And I'll say, well, do you want it to look like this, or do you want to look like that? And we had that conversation. So now it's captured in Jira, and we can always go back in history and see what happened. So after a while, they started getting comfortable with putting issues in Jira, and it worked out pretty good. So at this stage, things are going pretty well. Yeah. But after a while, I still felt like there's something missing. We were experiencing some difficulty in communication. We seem to be saying the same words, but operating off of different dictionaries. And lo and behold, I finally put my finger on it. My product owner for this product came from a waterfall background, but he was saying Agile words. And me, I'm speaking all the Agile terminology, and we think we're talking the same thing, but it turns out we were not. And so that was an interesting experience. So it was about that time leadership had realized it's been a long time since we had the training, and we had product owners had changed positions. We had new ones come in, and matter of fact, this guy had been in about 18 months at that time. So they sent them off to some more product owner training for a couple of days. So he went off and he fired an email back to my boss and his boss and all up down the chain saying, "Oh, I am so sorry. Now I know what Scott was talking about." He was very apologetic and realized his eyes were open. He realized that he wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing as a product owner because he had a different frame of reference. So when he got back from that training, it was phenomenal. He piled onto that Agile bus with the team and we went off down the road. So, okay, we're all pretty happy. We knew there'd be some bumps along the way. However, we were now better equipped. We could see the road ahead. We could read the warning signs, and we would be able to deal with any of the obstacles that came along the way. So as a retrospective is really, can an Agile team really function in a government organization? Yes, it can, but not, you got to adapt it. You got to adapt the Agile as well as the organization. And that's the key part. And so one of my bosses, way back when told me flexibility equals survivability. So you got to be flexible. So there's things you can do. You got to formalize what you can, informally work where you can. Product owner, the project manager has to sometimes serve as a pseudo product owner and scrum master, but you got to be very, very careful. The role really is to facilitate that conversation and to enable the decision makers to make the decisions that they should be. It's a very slippery slope because you could find yourself actually acting more like the product owner and making some decisions on their behalf, which you really should not be doing. And so that can be a challenge. And of course, developers, they have a lot of insight, and so empower them and they will do well. So the team is now fully engaged. They are collaborating together. They're no longer individual developers. They are team developers, much more cohesive, and things are working very well. The organization itself has not stagnated. We didn't just say, okay, now we're done. We are now reassessing where we're at, where we need to go. And so we're looking at, we still need some break down some of the stovepipe walls between the development teams. So we're actually empowering cross-team development. We're sharing information. We're sharing developers across teams to support different projects. We're also working to bridge the gap between IT and system development to get more of a DevOps situation going. And so we're just continuing evaluating. So in the last few minutes, I'd like to talk quickly about some of our open source solutions. We have there's normal reasons to go for it. It's innovative, a lot of cool things. It's supportable, customizable, and of course, cost is much better. So like I mentioned, these are the solution, the software applications and systems that we were supporting at the time, all on-prem. Here's the three that I'd like to highlight real quick. Product tracking system was the one I was talking about earlier, actually. Specification Explorer, and then our inventory system. So product tracking system, it really is just a high-level system that captures a lot of data and processes from data acquisition all the way to publication. And so we're building that now on an open source stack with Django, Python, Postgres framework, with GeoServer, Leaflet, and some Jaster reports for some reporting purposes. And that's going extremely well. And real quickly, it's, the users come into a home map. They have some filtering that they can preview on there, and that could be their first stop. That's all they want to find out, some general information. Or they can download some footprints with some attribution if they want to do some analysis on their own. And they can dig into a specific project and get a little overview, get further in. Now they'll have more details about the project itself, the funding, the documentation, all that stuff. Another one we have is a Specification Explorer. This is a repository database of the specifications and symbols used to make a map. And that's constantly changing. So they wanted to make that interactive. And that's on the same stack, Django, Python framework. And Geospatial data architecture, that is our inventory system. That is on a proprietary database and applications, and it is a monster. Everything goes through that. And that's how we get stuff published. We are getting close to completing a migration to a Django Python framework as well with a Postgres database, PostGIS. And we're scheduled to be done with that end of this August. So in summary, we are extremely happy with using open source solutions. It's one of the big things is a huge support network on the web, reduced costs, of course, flexibility, but I want to leave you, there are some challenges. You got to be careful to guard against building up technical debt. You got to keep up with versioning and security and all that, but it's a whole lot more refreshing and easier than we had before. So that concludes my presentation. And so I'll open up for questions. I can share my, there we go. Thank you very much.